أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد والثناء لرب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب قلوبنا وشفيء ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا بالقاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We're back with this weekly program. We begin the series on family matters, and today we're continuing the discussion which we had started about conflict resolution and family feuds. And so now we're doing the second installment or part two, the continuation of that. It's a lot to cover. It's a deep topic, and we don't want to. I don't want to do anything short of, what's necessary for it. So, in order to do that, we'll have to make sure that we spend enough time on the relevant topics. Okay. Last week we talked about some of the principles when it comes to conflict resolution. These are basic things that we need to be paying attention to, basic focal points, things that we can't ignore, and just general principles that we always need to know when we're talking about issues within the family. And as we mentioned, sometimes that's husband and wife, sometimes that's father and child. So there's different dynamics, siblings with each other, and different things like that. Those principles that we mentioned before, those are all relevant to that. So if you missed that, then go back and check the previous installment, the previous part one of conflict resolution. Now we're into part two. Okay, let's get right into it. Um, we touched on this just a little bit, and I mentioned that we'll go into more detail in in this session, and that was about finding fault in others. First of all, whenever there is a problem, right, we have to determine and decide what is the problem. There's another aspect to that. Is this a valid problem? Is it actually a problem? Because then we have problems and then we have, preferences, right? And getting to a point of serious conflict should not be for the small things, you know, um, little details, that shouldn't be focal points or cause, you know, any lack of harmony in between family members. There's a time when we're talking about serious problem. Well, how do we get to decide what determines is something a serious problem or not a serious problem? We have to look to the what Islam says. Now, if someone is engaging in, for example, in the family network, in a family dynamic, someone's using ill language, bad language, yelling at someone, calling them names. Okay, that is a problem. Islam doesn't. A believer shouldn't deserves the respect of another believer. They shouldn't call people out of their names. Shouldn't call people disrespectful things. So once we identify that's the problem, then we can get to the point of what that looks like or what's the solution. But sometimes what we're seeing is that it's not actually a problem. It's just a preference. It's a preference. I like such and such a thing. You know, I remember there's this a couple was saying that the wife was saying that she cooked, you know, several course meal. She made everything. She knows her husband's working hard, he's out, and she wanted to do something nice to surprise him. So she makes, a whole bunch of different things, 7-course meal. And he comes in, he looks, smells, looks good, smells good, starts looking through the pots and things, and, oh, he made this, made that, all of his favorites. And then he said, well, why didn't you make any rice? Where's the rice? You know, and he was kind of upset about the rice. Now, if he goes and complains, to the Shaykh, my wife didn't make the rice. Yes, she made 7 course meal, but she didn't make this one thing. We're getting down to that's your preference, but is that a problem? If anything, it's a problem and lack of gratitude, on his part. So we've got to differentiate between those things which are not really problems, right? This is number one. People are coming to the table talking about things that are, their sort of, preferences. And that's what relationships look like. Good relationships look like places where there is compassion, places where there can be compromise, places where people can, try different things or go get out of their comfort zone, but also be comfortable with the other person. That's what a good relationship can look like. And if it becomes such, though, that my preference becomes something which I feel that I'm a victim of because of that, then we get into a whole nother world of problems. That is where the problem comes in. You understand what I'm saying? Okay, for example, it's a it's a preference. A wife has a preference that her husband sit down and have, this long conversation when he comes home from work. And his preference is to, take his time to relax, to chill, and to unwind, and then, come and, talk during dinner or afterwards or whatever. And so she blows up and explodes. You're not spending enough time with me. We're not talking and taking something that is not inherently a problem, but making it a problem. And then when we do that, when we focus on things that aren't really serious issues, what we do is we create a problem. Because now this person is angry at this person because they're calling them out. They're saying that they're not doing enough. They're disappointed at them. And so, someone gets angry, tones get raised, go back and forth, and we find ourselves in a whole other place. Yeah. We have to distinguish between preferences, and I'm not saying that a person's personal preferences and things are not important at all, but we have to distinguish between the things which are necessary to be in a harmonious setting, and the things which are extra, right? Anything that we're if someone is drinking alcohol in their household, if there's a sibling and you know that they're doing drugs, if there's a child and you know that they're involved in something that they should not be involved in, they're looking at things that they should not be looking at, then this is a problem. And we have to find out how do we address it, right? But if you find that, for example, someone, a parent giving their child a hard time, their daughter's wearing hijab, she's wearing, modest clothing, they said, I don't like this color more than that color. Oh, you're wearing something, it's a light green. Why don't you wear something black? Come on, parents, don't be too hard on your kids. So here we go to the area of preference. And that becomes a place where we can create a lot of other problems out of that. Then we're wondering, for example, I'm going to be harder on my child because I have this preference. So then they end up becoming more stubborn. They end up retaliating more, right? They end up having other issues where they're not listening at all, or they feel that they're justified in being disrespectful in some way. Not that I'm saying that that's justified, but these are the things that come out of that a lot of times. So first of all, let's put problems in one category, and let's put our own personal preferences in another category. Let's distinguish them. And when we are talking about problems, we have to look at the lid from the lens of Islam. Please, please, I'm always calling out Dr. Phil and Oprah and these folks because I find that people are very comfortable listening to the opinions of whoever and not caring about what does the opinion of Islam say. How did Islam look at things? And that's where we get into muddy waters. Okay, based on this society standard, um, for example, based on this society standard, uh, there's an idea where children become 18 years old, they should be completely free. You should be able to do what they want. And if you go to a psychologist or a counselor and your child is 20 years old or 19 years old or whatever have you, and you as a parent, you're concerned they're doing this or saying this, you know what I mean, how they're interacting with someone who's not mahram, what are they doing on social media? You go to a counselor, they're going to say, what's your problem? Why are why do you have this problem? Why are you being controlling as a parent? Let them be, let them do what they want. What's the reason for that? The reason for that is because they have a different value set. They're judging they're looking at problems in a completely different way. So let's not get caught up in what American society considers a problem or not a problem. If you go sit down with a counselor and you're trying to do some family counseling and a sibling says that I'm having problems with my sibling, I can't take my kids over there because they're drinking, and the counselor might say, well, do they have a drinking problem? They're alcoholic. If not, if they drink sometimes, what's the big deal? It's a different standard, you know. Don't try to define, Islamic values with American standards. They're not always going to be the same. With Western standards, they're not always going to be the same. So let's differentiate those things first and foremost. Now we get to trying to solve the problem, trying to fix the issues whenever they exist. And we're going to have a third installment, just heads up. We're going to have a third part where we get into who's right and who's wrong. It's like everybody's favorite part. And the reason because everybody's always right, you know. so so people just can't wait to let other people know that hey, I'm right and I want to be able to say I told you so. But it's not that simple, of course. And when it comes to passing judgment between those things, there's some important details that we need to understand and know, and we'll get into that, the who's right and wrong, and and how do we decide in judgment in the next session. When there is a problem, one of my favorite questions to ask, if two people come and say, you know what, I have this problem with so and so, one of my favorite questions to ask is, please tell me that this problem that exists, whatever that is, tell me just what you did to contribute to this problem. You want to see people get stunted in their tracks, do a double take, just look like they've just been, zapped with a shrink ray. They just have disappeared. They have no idea. You're speaking a completely alien language. Why is that? That's because it's really hard to see our problems, our faults, our contribution to a problem. It's very hard. One of the reasons why Islam encouraged us to have counsel, to seek someone, an outside party to counsel. In the Quran, where it talks about when people have, when there's a issue in the family, then bring someone from each side, someone wise, someone who's understanding, someone who has knowledge of, Islam and relationships to advise and to help people. But it's very hard for people themselves to see if they, now hopefully those are, fair people. Obviously, that's what's intended, not people who are biased and going to just say whatever's in favor of whoever they're related to, or whoever they like more, arbitrary reasons. But it's very hard to be introspective and see the problem. And I want to say that please don't take this aspect of being able to be introspective and see your own faults lightly. I will say that this is one of those, magnanimous, incredible, virtuous uh, uh, qualities. Everybody can't do that. Everybody doesn't have that. Some people are completely blind. They're completely blind. Like, you ask them about what they contributed, they turn into the monkey emoji with his hands on its eyes and hands on his mouth. They don't want to say anything. They don't want to see anything. They can't say anything. They feel like they're right all the time. Now, a smart person, if just logically speaking, if they are right, then they would have no problem to do that self-examination. It's a fear of what if I'm wrong? What if I'm not right? What if I have to start analyzing things that I did to contribute to a problem? We have this unfortunate situation where n- most of the time, I believe maybe 90% of the time, when people are talking about problems in a counseling session, I give a lot of credit and kudos and props to anybody who recognizes the issues and seeks, counseling to resolve them. And obviously, good counsel. Someone who knows Islam and also is aware of relationships and good etiquette and adab. I say that's awesome, good for you if you take that step. But most of the time, it's way late in the game. It's way, way late. People come to counseling and they say things like, this person always does this. That person always does that. It means that what they're saying is that this has been going on for a long time. People come to counseling and they're basically at the end, and that's really too late. People sometimes they see counseling and they're all the way at the place where they're tired, they're exhausted. Well, that makes it that much harder. And to complicate that, what if you came to counseling after a decade of being fed up with something, after years of, your siblings, doing things that, bother you and you're not associating with them or whatever the case is? After parents and children get distant from each other because they're, so aggravated by these choices that they've made, after a long time that these things have just festered, it created and created more tension. At that time, people want to, if they come to the table and they're willing to have that conversation, they're not always willing to think that they could have done something wrong. I'll say some people are. Some people are objective and honest and fair, but a lot of times people aren't. They're just not ready. And if you sit and tell them in this scenario, they come, well, I have so many problems. Okay, just tell me about how you contributed to this problem. What did you do? They can tell you what the other person did, and they can go on and on and on. They wouldn't stop talking. They wouldn't, you know what I mean? They could write volumes about it. But if you ask them, just only talk about, just make I statements, and they have to think down that right now There's a lot of tension between two people. And they have to think, maybe I said some things. Maybe I acted some way. And it's the hardest thing to do for a lot of people. It's a jihad. That is an incredible struggle, you know. I remember one of my teachers giving the example of Prophet Yunus, Jonah, and saying that one of the spirit when he's trapped in the whale, one of the beautiful virtues, spiritual virtues, is to look at the problem and the situation that you are in and look and say, is there anything I might have done that might have contributed to me being in this situation? And really look to see if where you might be able to improve yourself. If you improve yourself, who benefits from that? First and foremost, you do. First and foremost, we do. Ourselves. But it's so hard. It's not easy. It's easy to see the fault somewhere else. This person always. These kind of statements instead of I statements. You have to be vulnerable. I'm going to look in the mirror and say, I contributed to this problem. A couple finds themselves at the brink of divorce. If they seek a counselor and the counselor says, okay, tell me just what you may have done to contribute to this problem where now you find yourself on the brink of divorce. Now for them to admit that they had a role in the problem is very hard. But just imagine if you can do that, you can begin the healing process of fixing the problem. If somebody does something wrong, the wrong thing hurts. Does something wrong to someone else, I'm saying. Somebody lies to someone. Someone, hurts someone. Those things are painful in their own right. But there's nothing more painful than a person who's so arrogant, just like Shaitan. They're too proud to see where they might have done something wrong, right? It's double whammy. Hurts even more. Okay, there's the hurt from what you did, but if you came, at least you sincerely apologized. You really wanted to fix it. You really realized what you did wrong. Inshallah, if a person has an ounce of, a sincerity in them, then they can forgive and you can move on from that. But where do we get stuck? We're too proud. Too proud of where we are. There's a hadith from, I'm forgetting which Imam this hadith is from Imam Ali alayhi salam. He talks about the wisest of people, and the most intelligent of people. أعقل الناس من كان بعيبه بصيرا. The most intelligent of people who is the person who can see their own flaw. وعن عيب غيره ضريرا. But the flaws of others, they're blind to, they don't see. Now, this is not to say that no one else has flaws or no one's problems are going to exist, but think about that for a minute. It's a sign of a person's intelligence to be able to see where they are. Just think about this. Let's take a automobile company, manufacturing company, or the design part of that. They're designing this car, right? They're designing those early Model T Fords, right? If there's no way to be able to accept criticism or to be able to look and see your own flaws, you're not going to be able to say, you know what, these things were wrong. Let's improve those. Where would their technology would not exist? Why? Because we wouldn't be able to accept that there's something that we can do better. We'd be like, you remember the big phones, mobile phones? They used to be like this big with a long antenna and they flipped open, or they used to be in the car, some of them. If you were at a real fancy car, maybe you had a car phone, you know, that looked like something from, a spaceship. That's where we would be right now. You wouldn't have your little smartphone with all kinds of features and things like that. You'd be stuck right there with your ginormous phone. Why? Because if the people in technology are not able to say, what's wrong with this? How can we do this better? How can we make things better? You'd be stuck. So, what do you think that does to a person, a human being? I find I get to this point in my life, boom. Then what happens to a lot of people is they never keep growing. Their level of intelligence gets stuck. Their level of their virtue and how good they are, it's become stagnant. And the reason is because at some point you have to be able to either accept criticism from others, accept that feedback, even if it's harsh. Now, I'm not saying that it's good to give people harsh feedback. We know that in our hadith it says you want to let someone know be that you want to be a good friend, a good relative, pull them to the side. Find a nice, respectful, noble, effective way that you don't cause them, that they can save face. You don't dishonor them. You don't put them on blast on social media or something like that. You find ways that are, respectful to deal with other people. But if someone comes and does give you harsh criticism, I remember there was a student that went to this arif, that went to this very spiritual teacher, instructor, and mystic and scholar, and he went to his teacher and he was really upset. He was really upset. He had gone and he became a muballigh. He became a propagator of religion, like someone, like me, who's gives speeches and gives lectures and does counseling and things like that. So he, was working with some community. The community wasn't, the community, after what they after the honeymoon phase, they call the honeymoon phase, when people they start out something in the beginning and everything is lovely, everything is beautiful, everything is lovely. And then we start to see those flaws in one another a lot more. It happens when people get married and they're in love, they're head over heels. They wouldn't even believe that the other person's breath could stink. They just are imagining, this kind of these rosy lenses, and everything's beautiful. Then after a while, maybe after a few years, sometimes, that fades to some degree, and people can see the flaws that people have. Oh my goodness, in the morning your breath can stink? Lord have mercy. But the point that I want to make is that even when the criticism is very, very harsh, and that's what the student came and told the teacher. He said, I have received really harsh criticism. They told me that you're not a great scholar in this field. You don't know this well. You don't do this great. Your speeches are so. You're sometimes you're late for things. And they went on, and they started. It was certainly a disrespectful approach, you know, apparently. But what the teacher told him was this. He said, all of those things that they said, he's asking the teacher, how should I deal with these ignorant people? They should respect me more. And he said to him, and this is the beauty and wisdom of the Urafa, those who are really practice that spiritual journey. He says to him that go to a quiet place, where you like an early in the morning, late at night time when it's just you and your prayer rug and just quietness, and sit between you and your Lord and just consider if these things are actually true. When there's no one to save face from, when there's only Allah, when there's no one to feel proud in face of them, when there's no one that you feel threatened by, it's just you alone. Take that feedback, take those words, take that criticism, internalize and consider, or is it true? Ask yourself that question. And so he did. He went, he sat down. He says he thought to himself, oh my God, you know, um, sometimes I am late for things. Sometimes this series of how I said something might not have been great. Maybe I do need to work on, this particular, whatever this other thing was. And he realized that some of these things that were said about him were true. They were true. So what did he do? He went back to his teacher. He's like sweating and like, yeah, actually about that, I think maybe I might have some flaws. Those things might have been true. And his teacher said, you should go kiss the hands of the people who criticized you. Then he's like, "Oh man, come on! I just had a breakthrough. I just realized that okay, yes, I was able to sit down with me and my Lord and see that wow, actually, some of this criticism there was absolute truth in it, and it was constructive for me. But now you're telling me go kiss the hands of the people who told me these things, and that was hard. Still, it was still hard." Now, the point of what the teacher was telling him was that value and appreciate and show gratitude to someone who it may seem on the surface that what they're saying is negative and we get defensive. We put up our guards. We're ready to box. He says, but if I'm able to see what that is, what I'm being told, what my shortcomings are, next thing you know, I'm able to become better. I'm able to evolve. I benefit from that. One of the this recently one of the greatest basketball players of all time, Kobe Bryant, died in a real tragic, unfortunate, and the tragic, unfortunate helicopter accident with his daughter. And I would say one of the things that I really, really admired about the life of Kobe Bryant was one was his work ethic, that he didn't feel like he wanted to take days off. He wanted to be first in the gym, working the hardest, trying the hardest. We as Muslims, we love to take days off. As Muslims, we want to just okay, I'll get back to that. I'll do more work later. Yeah, so much things need to be done in the world, in my life and community. We love to take time off, and that kind of work ethic where you have that ambition and you're constantly striving. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا, those who strive in our ways, لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Allah says we guide them to our ways. So when you're striving, you get that added blessing and benefit from Allah. Other side to that, other part of what I admired about Kobe, how open he was to constructive criticism and fixing himself. Okay, we're good, but how do I do this better? My footwork is good, but I want to be even better. So let me spend, extra time learning from, for example, we went and learned from Hakim Olajuwon on some moves about some footwork. It made him elevate. Now, what if somebody is coach or somebody telling you that, hey, you need to work on this. If this is not being done well, and you get upset and you just get mad and you get defensive, how would you ever get better? How can we get better? And ultimately, who benefits? Who benefits? Number one, ourselves. Number one, ourselves. So while there's an aspect of, because when there's a problem that exists in the family dynamic, there's a tendency for people have a tendency to look for even more problems, to look for faults, which in the hadith it says looking for faults in and of itself is a fault, right? I want to leave you with the this hadith from Imam Rada alayhi salam, and I think it's a beautiful one that we need to embody. Before that, just before that, um, when there are problems in the family, after we, as I said in the beginning, we identify that it's an actual problem, not a preference and not something else. It's an actual legitimate problem according to what Islam says. If this problem exists, then we need to look for ways to solve it. Obviously, as I mentioned, counseling is one of the ideal solutions, an outside third party to come and help, someone qualified. When that happens or in the process of that, a lot of times, unfortunately, what happens is people start looking, microscope, they're zooming in. What else are you doing wrong? So even if there is a legitimate fault, maybe they compounded and now they're looking for every single thing. Now they're just so on edge. They feel more proud and more self-righteous. So they feel good about themselves. Makes it easier to see other people's faults. Then on top of that, they're making mountains out of molehills sometimes and trying to look for, any little detail, any possible thing. You know, this really makes things go sour really fast. A parent sees their child is hanging out with the wrong crowd, is interacting on social media in a way that's inappropriate. So this is a legitimate concern and it needs to be addressed. And hopefully there's an internal way that between themselves they can fix it. That's ideal. But if not, then as we said, there's a counseling option. But what if now they just start to see everything wrong? And they highlight everything. I've seen this happen. Like that instance, social media for something inappropriate happened, and the parents looking and saying that you don't dress right. Maybe they're just fine, but they're picking on them on that, or they start picking on them on what their hair looks like, and they start picking on them on their routine, what they want to be in life. And it creates a real feud, and it creates a problem. We can't look and just really put all of our energy and emphasis into finding faults in other people. Part of the issue of fault finding itself would have in hadith, Imam Ali says that the person who's incapable of getting to know something will find something wrong with it. You know, it's like almost a defense mechanism, a way of not dealing with situations. So a lot of times, this is true for other things. Like someone, for example, they don't really get how there's an aspect of something and they don't understand, or they don't understand how homes works, or they don't understand. It doesn't make sense to them zakat. It doesn't make sense to them fasting, prayer, making salat 5 times a day doesn't make sense. So then they try to find that this is wrong with that. Why would you do this? Or they look for faults that aren't even really there, but it's a fault of their intellectual depth and ability to understand. And this is true in relationships that a lot of times we don't know one another. We assume that because people are in a family that, everybody knows each other, but you'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't be surprised actually, how many people outside of their family life they have a whole group of people, friends, audience, so on and so forth, but within the scope of their family, they're less appreciated, less acknowledged, less known, less respected. And it's unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. I want to end on the hadith of Imam Rida. He said, when you see someone, whoever they are, consider that that person in God's eyes may be better than you. It's deep. It it knocks you off your high horse a little bit, right? A person who we often feel self-righteous, justified, good about ourselves is part of the what makes it easy to see faults in other people. What if I was able to look at someone else and think that maybe there's something that they have that Allah loves. Maybe they are better than me in some ways or many ways. I remember that there were some siblings and they had really gotten distant because there was some family issues. There was some divorce. They became very distant from each other. They grew up, like, two best friends, a brother and sister that were so tight. They were like two best friends. They did everything together. They went to the same school. They always laughed together, joked together. They had each other's back. And then this issue happened and they became distant. And they became distant for many years. And I remember that the brother said something which was beautiful. He said, I only try to remember the good things about my sister. Right? I only focus on these things. I really try to not to focus on the flaws or the faults that I have seen. I try to think about the time when we were kids and she had my back. I try to think of the time when, I was sick and she took care of me. I try to think of the time when, you know, uh, she helped me and taught me something that I didn't know, helped me to get through school, helped me to do my homework, gave me a ride somewhere. I try to think of a time when she was really supportive when I was down. And that to me was the most beautiful and impressive thing. Now their relationship wasn't completely healed, but it might get to that point one day. Just simply because of the perspective of being able to say, you know what, I see the good in this person. I remember these beautiful things. And when things go sour in a marriage, when there's a problem, and people highlight and focus on the problem, and I'm not saying that the problems are not problems or they should be absolutely ignored, but how about a perspective of remembering what's positive? How does that help a person? And that person doesn't become only that problem. When you see them, you see this issue. No, when you see them, you should also see the good things that they did, the positive aspects, where they were helpful, where they were supportive, where they were a good believer, where they gave in charity, where they made their prayers. And then look at the totality of an individual and say, wow, oh, okay, well, it's easier to see, and everybody has shortcomings. I have shortcomings. How can I now maybe be a little gentler in my approach in dealing and resolving the problem? A little less harsh because I'm not just looking at the problem. I'm remembering the positive and the good in this person as well. Inshallah, Allah give us all the tawfiq and the success that we may be of those people who have hilm and clemency, self-restraint in dealing with others, and have an attitude of kindness and benevolence, forgiveness, because these are divine virtues. These are what make human beings godlike. These are godlike attributes. These are godly attributes that we can embody in our human capacity when we decide to be more kind, when we decide to be more forgiving. And this path is not always easy. And I always think to myself when things are a little bit harder, man, maybe this is that great jihad. This is that great struggle, right? This is the real work. Are we ready to do that? You know, inshallah, Allah help us all and keep me and my family in your prayers and du'as. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you all ajr and a reward for your participation and for your time and for your efforts. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. Um, and may He make us all of the A'wan and Ansar, the helpers and supporters of the 12th Imam, Imam Mahdi Ajalallah Ta'ala Farajul Sharif. Let's close together. Please, even if you're at home, let's recite together Dua Faraj. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم كن لوليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توءا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجه. Till next week, inshallah. Next week, same time.